What's up, y'all? It's Jeff, and I know that these are hella late, but I'm not gonna lie, I sort of just really lost interest after the mecha stuff started happening, but in the interest of finishing what I started, and in the interest of free time, I say let's pick it back up. And we do that with the group discussing the very mechas that broke the show for me. But one of the dope things about this episode is it feels like everyone's pulling their weight. The plan for Higan and Emma is to infiltrate Aza and steal their energy. Meanwhile, Mike and Jason plan to keep investigating Aza, all at the risk of exposing Higan and Emma's identities. Speaking of exposing, I really got a kick out of the moment Mike flat out accused them of foul play. Because honestly, I can't say I didn't consider some canoodling too. Catching up with Aza, we see Joe getting real frustrated with Yamaji. Joseph is still hellbent on this whole world domination motive, and it makes sense because that god complex was really always there. I will say though, I was almost impressed by how bold Joe was stepping up to Yamaji until I realized it was just a hologram. Yeah, the tension is bubbling with these two. And this really feels like an episode that you can track Higan's growth in. Like, he's finally showing some humanity, and I appreciate that. In fact, they were all kind of starting to feel like a team this episode. And that word, were, is going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting. While we bide our time awaiting the rematch with Joe, Big D continues to be the best of Aza. Seriously, not only is he not annoying, he's actually pretty charming. Like, I was not bothered at all by how much setup and exposition was going into this because his presence was just so commanding. And yeah, there was setup, but Big D pulled up too. Higan and D finally get their moment while the others keep trying to hack into the system. It's pretty dope actually how quick things turned up. It shows how threatening Aza really is. And Emma's just like, man, I really hope they don't use a rocket launcher. The mecha fight's happening and I'm going along with it, but really I'm so much more invested in what the others are up to. And you know what? Despite Jason's jab, it really does feel like the four of them are contributing in a meaningful way, and it's nice to see them all standing tall. Alright, despite that being the second fake-out death to Emma, it still got me. And it shouldn't have, because I should have known better that killing the black guy off first would have been cancelable by law. So with a very extended dying breath, Big D asks Emma why she betrayed them. And I really did like her answer that she was just never with them to begin with. I like that because being headstrong is just one of Emma's top qualities, and it's consistent. After that closure, Big D starts to go boom. Mike rushes in to save her, and what you think is going to be a cliche actually gets turned on you. Big D takes Emma with her, and I can only think to myself, is it for real this time? It definitely feels real this time. And it's pretty dang tragic Emma would have to suffer even more, showing her disfigured face to the world before croaking. While dying, she's covered in embarrassment and shame, but she still manages to make the moment kind of beautiful.
I'm so lucky, baby.
Honestly, either Mike or Emma going out would get me. Emma had a good heart, and Mike just really didn't sign up for this. Now, he's practically lost 2 daughters and is living with survivor's guilt forever. It was just a really magnificent scene, honestly one of the best so far. And I hate to say it because I love her, but it would really dilute this moment if Emma came back. This episode really did feel like a culmination of their characters. It was the first, and maybe last time we get to see them work together as a team, and despite the alright action, the emotion just carried. This was real build-up that felt foreshadowed, and the storytelling was just all there. Giving it an 8. Moving on to the next episode, it looks like a Zai one, and I was starting to think, man, maybe I was missing out. I don't know what this man's intent here was, but either way, it seemed like he deserved the outcome. It looks like Zai basically grew up in some kind of war zone. Yamaji witnessed his brutality, his raw strength, and was like, oh heck yeah. And he ended up greeting Zai with a real ninja handshake. This little sequence was brief and definitely left you wanting more, but it does get the point across that basically no well-adjusted person would ever join Yamaji. Now, I don't want to say Mike's moved on, so let's just say he's making his peace. The pressure must really be starting to crack them because Joe even cracked a smile. Like he's really snapping. Mike says he wants to move Emma from here because it's desolate and he doesn't want her to feel alone. But Higan in his newfound empathy reassures him that she'd be dying near the people that she considered home. And it's really hard to imagine that coming from him in the first few episodes. I think it also just helps that they've got their priorities straight. Although Jason is still struggling with their system, Emma has locked these codes like a chastity belt, and while trying to crack it, the worst fate for a ninja befalls them. Ozza has projected their faces to the world and labeled the four of them as terrorists. And it's crazy too, because even if they did survive this, any chance they had of a normal life now is just zilch thanks to this guy. You can clearly see the closer we get to the, end, the more desperate Blondie gets to reach his goal. Even if he's burning every bridge along the way. And it's getting even worse for him now that Yamaji and their group stolen the gear mechanics. Because what that means is Joseph is now disposable. So while they're discussing which news outlets will platform terrorists besides Fox, Higan receives a challenge. During their early ninja days, Yamaji spent years intentionally implanting propaganda into Zai's mind. And it looks like that was just too much mental engineering for an already pretty deranged person. To me, it feels like Zai stood for strength while Higan stood more for unity. And in order to test each other's ideals, they have a good old-fashioned off-screen brawl. And this is obviously to keep the suspense going for their real-time match. It really is an interesting decision too to humanize them this late in the season. I don't mind it though, it sort of does help to build the pressure all at once. Much like the pressure of being the only three to pass in your class and being sent practically on a suicide mission. It's a really dark sort of idea that the show has been going with, that the closest people you end up with are just those that survived. You see, there's really a lot of parallel between Zai and Emma too. Both lone wolves abandoned by their parents fighting for a somewhat vague cause. In turn, Mari really impacted Emma's life, but it seems like it took both her and Joe to get through to Zai. They sort of became like the family he never had. But once Higan's protection broke, so did the ninja code. This forced the two of them out of the group and forced Zai to be alone again. Man, I feel for him and that sense of betrayal. It sucks and probably re-traumatized him. All of these things in his past he never got to address, but it seems like the time has arrived. Elsewhere, Mike finally confronts his old demons too with his boss who was literally acting guilty from the beginning. So although it's not a huge reveal by any means, it's still nice watching Mike shake this guy down. Apparently we find out his boss actually was a decent person at one point. It's a little random, but those days are gone. Nearly every match has had some emotional weight to it. Not all of it is heavy, but we've watched the characters carry it. Plus the soundtrack continues to be a freaking treat. Really makes the scene. The action was pretty above average, pretty good, but the suit smash was the highlight. Perfectly raw for the scene, and the cliffhanger just... I'm glad I didn't have to wait. Zai's backstory. It definitely adds new context to know they're both suffering in this fight. Zai's coming from a sense of abandonment, and that pain is real. Although, I can't help but feel like it is a tiny bit obsessive. All these years he's been harboring this hate just makes him seem very... unwell. But maybe that's just what happens when you're a person who literally owes your life to birds. All the emotion was there though, and I'm here for that, so I gotta give it a strong 7. Saving the backstory for so late into the season does add to that climactic feeling for sure. Earlier on, I made a comment about wanting to see what exactly makes these ninjas so loyal. And Zai sort of addresses that, saying that the ninjas and Yamaji gave him his livelihood. He doesn't go into too much detail, but it's enough to see why he's gone off the deep end here. But bro, yes, finally we get some real fighting. Now, I think the concept of ninja arts, ninja techniques, or whatever is pretty vague, or maybe I'm just not that educated on it. Maybe it's electricity, maybe it's multiple heads, maybe it's Maybelline, I don't know. But this mythical stuff absolutely can enhance a scene, there just needs to be a balance. To me, this episode struck that balance so well. Just, man, there is a lot going on with Zai. And in another parallel to Emma, Zai also got his face all messed up, but it was a consequence of letting Joe and Mari escape. So that weakness that he detests so much really cost him. It's pretty insane to think about how Higan manages to be the least fleshed out, and I really don't even mean hate, it's just that Emma, Mike, and Zai are surprisingly so well developed. The underlying theme I feel like they've been pushing here comes pretty clear to me in this one. Strength shouldn't come at the cost of your humanity. Loyalty is strength, big knife is strength, but stronger is the will to love. And honestly, I'm very satisfied with this conclusion. It's simple, it's to the point, and I'm pretty thankful that Joe didn't have to brutalize his old friend for no reason. Meanwhile, Jason and Mike are still struggling with this Emma encryption. Obviously I'm just thinking to myself, she has to have left them some kind of hint. Cause otherwise, dang Emma, you really nuked this operation. And we know that Mike has got to be the one to crack it too. With Aza, Joseph is busy having the worst energy ever. But to his credit, he's actually one step ahead of Yamaji in the plagiarism plan. So there's a problem with these invincible due to status but actually weak characters. It's the fact that they're all talk. If Yamaji was to really confront him, Joseph would be done and dusted, so it feels like a lot of yap. And Yamaji seems to agree with that statement, making a clear example of the henchman. Oh shit! Bro, you know he didn't want to pick that up. I had made a claim Joseph could be the real antagonist, and honestly, I still don't think it was too far off. Although, Yamaji is definitely calling the shots now. Somehow, someway, they have actually made me feel bad for Joseph. I think it's just because he turned pathetic faster than I could have imagined. Good work, King. Now, at this point watching the episode, I found myself really not wanting it to end. Maybe part of that is a knowledge of just how close we are to the end of the season, but it's just nice seeing the fruits of their labor finally budding. And yo, let me say, Joseph does not deserve a ride or die like Dilly. In some far distant universe, I would have loved to see what 4 kids would have done with that line. Eventually, Yamaji does pull up and puts the pressure on Dilly. She lets him know that she's simply following orders and continues to do just that. Now, I'm not sure whether that toss was to protect him or not, but either way, it put a big smile on my face. Dilly, classic. And take note that the fact that baddie like this would sacrifice herself for that guy really shows you what money can accomplish. Dang. The fact Zai is still up and brooding definitely leads me to believe he'll get a third match against Higan. Almost feels like fate has wound them together, so I'm sure they'll reconcile eventually too. Cause really, only a handful of these characters are straight up evil. The rest I'd say are more so misguided. Extremely misguided, but still, I think there's hope for Zai yet. Nice. To be honest, these episodes were about what I expected, although there were a lot of key moments that did blow my expectations. Like Emma actually biting the bullet, that threw me off. I'm also so happy to see the hand-to-hand combat back because it reassures me it will stay a part of the series in some capacity. And I've been stuck thinking about this late character exploration. It was like action first, story second, and you don't see that a whole lot. I do think though, it is a really great way to hype up the next season because it makes these characters feel fresh, which this episode played a huge role in, so I give it an 8.